Welcome to our second JFP One-on-One event, this one with Mayor Tony Yarber. I'm Todd Stauffer, publisher of the Jackson Free Press and Boom Jackson magazine. I'd like to thank Millsaps College for helping us put this event together and the Solutions Journalism Network for their part in funding some of the work that has led up to this evening. Your report tonight is Jackson Free Press Editor-in-Chief Donna Ladd. And just let me set the tone here a little bit because I've started introducing the words at the tone. We're going to do about an hour's worth of discussion. We will have a Q&A, but because we're trying to get all this video done, we'd like to ask the questions on this mic. So if you would write down your question, most of you got a card. If you didn't get a card, your neighbor would have one. Write it down. We'll pass it over here after about 50 minutes or an hour. Dorothy already has a question. And we will ask those questions after they've done their discussion. We are videoing this, so if you need to watch it again, you'll be able to see it on the Jackson Free Press site, and it is live on Facebook for the first time for us. So we're trying Facebook Live, and we'll have a crowd over there as well. So, Donna Ladd, Editor-in-Chief of the Jackson Free Press. Donna has a bachelor's degree from Mississippi State University in political science and a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University. Donna is a W.K. Kellogg Foundation Fellow focusing on youth and media. And as many of you know, she spent 8 weeks in New York last year reporting on the NYPD and gun violence initiatives, thanks in part to a John Jay College Preventing Violence Fellowship and a Solutions Journalism Network grant. She actually spent another week there a week ago. That work has informed the reporting she's done over the past few months in the Jackson Free Press, as well as some of the conversations that she and the mayor have been having over that same time frame. Our guest is Jackson Mayor Tony Yarber. Tony T. Yarber was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and is the product of Jackson Public Schools, a graduate of Forest Hills High School. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern Mississippi and a master's from Jackson State University. He's a pastor, educator, author, and transformational leader who has committed his life to public service. In 2009, Yarber became city councilman for Ward 6 in the city of Jackson. In April of 2014, Yarber became the youngest mayor elected in the capital city of Mississippi. He's married to Rosalind Neal Yarber and the father of 3 amazing children, Carmen, Cameron, and Tony Michelle. Ladies and gentlemen, Donna Ladd and Tony Yarber.
Thank you, Mayor, for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to all of you for being here. I also want to just quickly shout out a lot of members of the Youth Media Project that we're doing this summer are here. They have the orange lanyards, and they're going to be they're covering this. They've been following the mayor around as we did a ride-along last week in a lot of Jackson, where the mayor grew up, so we're going to talk about that. And so say hey to them if you get a chance, because they're working really hard. They have the orange lanyards on. So thanks to them for being here and helping cover the event tonight. So, well, thanks so much for being here, Mayor. As you know, we've kind of been having these conversations. Our focus tonight, as you probably gathered, is this idea of we're just trying to have these rich conversations about really essentially about young people, preventing crime, education, areas that I know that you're really interested in. And we want your perspective.
Sure.
So, you know, do you have a few words you want to say opening?
Well, yeah, I first begin by thanking you for the work that y'all have been doing, particularly around this subject, and the fact that you're not just talking about crime and statistics and who got killed and who got robbed, but you're actually talking about ways and means to see this kind of stuff curbed and prevent it as much as we can possibly do. And so I just want to appreciate you for a full body perspective in terms of your journalism. So I just want to open by saying that. Thank you. Thank
you very much. And that's in the spirit of tonight. So, and we believe a lot in storytelling. And one of the reasons that I asked you to drive around with me last week and take me to some of your Jackson, such as where you grew up in Sub 2 and live in South Jackson, those kind of things, so that we really have a sense of what your perspective is, especially as someone who grew up here. So start out just by talking a little bit about that. You know, talk about your history in Jackson and really how your upbringing here has kind of shaped your own perspective, particularly on the problems of crime.
Yeah, so those of you who have followed me and know a little bit about me know I grew up out in West Side Subdivision number 2. And I can say that before I was 13, I've probably seen 7 or 8 dead bodies, you know, within 15 to 20 feet. And so by the time I was junior high, it was almost numbing, the fact that people that you knew could get killed, and people that you knew could be here today and you're not seeing them anymore. I had a good friend, his name was LaKenya Bolden. I talk about LaKenya a lot. LaKenya and I went to school together from elementary up until his demise right after 9th grade. Good kid, you know, funny kid. He's a teacher's worst nightmare, but a best friend's best friend. And I was on my way, we were getting ready to go to 10th grade, it was the summer. And LaKenya was coming into the sub on Wiggins Road. I don't know if you remember that road, but we stopped. He was coming in, I was going out, he blew, I blew. When I was coming back home, there were cars parked all along Wiggins Road. You couldn't get in. I got out, walked down the street, and ambulance, all these cars were there, police. And come to find out, LaKenya had just gotten shot in the chest because he didn't want to give a guy his bag phone. And LaKenya was the first person who was killed who was my friend, who I loved, who we shared stuff with and played together, and somebody that I would literally miss because he was gone. And so, you know, that day, it made it real. It made me really believe that it could happen to me. But fortunately, I had great parents who kept a tight lid on the kinds of things that I did, places that I went, folks that I hung out with. But that's not necessarily everybody's testimony. And so that's, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why we're here tonight, is to talk about those folks who don't necessarily have the same opportunities, or don't necessarily have the same parents, don't necessarily have the same kind of environment or nurturing that I had. So the way that I see crime in the city is it's multifold. It's an issue of lack of education, or the kind of education that doesn't yield the kind of fruitful and productive people that we should have. Then you have crime of circumstance, where things happen, life happens, and then you're faced with the kind of decisions that many of the folks that we met the other day have been faced with. And they may not have made the same kind of decisions that you and I have made. And then, you know, you got issues with people who deal with mental and emotional distress. So all of those are the kind of things that we have to think about, we have to consider. So whether I'm a citizen or whether I'm the mayor, all of those things are things that we've got to think about as we approach this conversation.
Oh, you said so much there. I could go many directions. First of all, I just want to say out loud that I'm guessing that at least a couple of people in this auditorium, and probably more, are surprised when you said that by the time you were 13 that you knew 7 or 8 people who had been killed.
Yeah.
Just want to say that. And I think that's an important thing to say out loud. You're the mayor of Jackson. Yeah. You grew up with good parents. Mm-hmm. And you still experience that. And one of the issues, you know, that emerges in a lot of the research, you know, about the causes of crime, particularly among young men of color in cities, you know, such as ours, is trauma. Right. And it's the trauma of actually having witnessed and experienced, it's PTSD, right?
Yeah, right.
And then a lot of them are actually fearing for their own lives because they, in many cases, arming themselves in order to protect themselves. And so it becomes this real cycle. So I wonder your response to that. I mean, what should we be thinking about with this trauma?
Well, I think that what we should be considering is a negative effect, the fact that it becomes numbing, and that people will, after a while, it doesn't faze you anymore. So I could see a dead body, or I could be watching a guy live streaming on Facebook 1 minute and be getting killed in Chicago the next minute, and it's nothing. And the fact that trauma in a lot of issues is a desensitization, and that people don't consider how damaging it is when you're desensitized to those kinds of things. I can tell stories forever, but there's one in particular that I was staying in the house we're living in now, on Dorgan. It was 2005. My baby girl was 8 months old, and my baby girl, my son, who was 2 at the time, we were in the front room. It was Christmas break. I was out, and we were sitting in the room, and I heard a tap on the door. Get up, go to the door, don't see anybody. Tap on the door again. I get up, go to the door, don't see anybody. By the time I'm sitting down, I hear this loud pop. And it was somebody trying to kick in the door. And so I ran to the door, and when I opened it, there were 2 guys outside. One guy was trying to break in the house, the other guy was trying to break in the car. And, me being foolish and young at the time, I started chasing. And one of the guys and myself, we fight. Didn't go well for him, just thought I'd say that. But the real story is when I got an opportunity to talk to his caseworker. And I had an opportunity to talk to his caseworker, and his caseworker said that something very similar had happened to this kid maybe 2 months ago. And so the fact that, and that one of the guys that he was with, I think had been either shot or shot at, but the fact that he would continue to try to, would stay in the same life and do the same kind of things, says that he's been desensitized to consequences, he's been desensitized to any of the repercussions that come as a result of that. So a lot of that trauma, at the end of the day, the negative part of it is what is the actual deterrent? Because they're not afraid. They're not, you're not going to say going to jail is going to keep them out. So obviously, going to jail, saying you're going to get more jail time, obviously those things aren't working. So what do we do to make people actually become less callous about these kinds of things?
And one of the things some young people have said to me, who've grown up in these circumstances, is that there is a lot of fear. It's just the fear is often of what's in front of you, more so than what could come later. And so
their reality,
it ends up being the same thing.
Yeah, their reality is their right now. So if their right now is food and eating, and it's those hierarchy of needs, and they're attempting to meet those needs, then college and all of those other things that's 5 years down the road seems a little less realistic for them.
Right, because it's more about what is now. Yeah. Now, so I'm trying to unpack your very first answer. So we talk about trauma, and we talk about, well, you just mentioned hunger.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think has just had a powerful impact on me as I've been talking to young people in difficult circumstances is how often hunger comes up, like literal hunger.
Right.
I mean, hunger for other things, but literal hunger because of not, and I'm talking about in many cases from young people whose mother was working 2 jobs or what, and so I think what I'd like you to address is this idea of, because some people will say, well, why are you hungry? Because get a job or get some assistance or whatever the situation might be, but how would you address that?
Well, look, the reality is if you can go to Stew Pot with me on a Saturday, our team we go and feed sometimes, or you can go to the summer feeding programs that Jackson Public School is doing right now. And you can walk in those rooms and you'll see people, and your assumption is that they're not hungry or that they shouldn't be hungry. But the reality is that we don't even shop the way that our parents used to shop. I want you to think about that, grocery shopping. You ever think about the fact how your parents or your grandparents could go grocery shopping poor, no money, and could cook every day, enough food for 8, 9, 10 people. And now we can go grocery shopping, buy food, spend the same amount of money, and have less amount of food to cook. And a lot of it has to do with we don't know the value of nutrition. And my point is that we buy a lot of things. You'll go to a house and you'll see a lot of homes where there are foods that are in cupboards, but it's empty carbs, or the nutritional value of the food that they're purchasing. It won't provide enough nutrition for a child to get them throughout a school day. And so by the time it's 2 o'clock, the child's ready for another meal and they just ate at 11:30 or 12. And that's because in a lot of cases, we've got children where there is food available, it's not the kind of food that everybody knows is packed with the kinds of nutrients and that they need.
And then you will hear a lot of people talk about having transportation to get to decent food because of the access and those kind of things as well.
So access, whether it's transportation, whether it's affordability, because remember, nutritious foods are expensive nowadays. So if you're talking about fresh fruits and vegetables, Doc is here, I don't want to get him started, but fresh fruits and vegetables, those kinds of things, in a lot of cases, they're out of reach for people who are on fixed incomes, or for people who where Medicaid or Medicare is their primary source of medical insurance. So those are, look, Jackson Public Schools, every child in Jackson Public Schools right now eats free lunch. Free lunch. And that speaks to a line of poverty that those children's parents or caretakers don't currently reach. So whether even if I can get to the food, I probably can't afford enough of it in order to have from May to June worth of nutritious food to eat.
Right. And, so when you're talking to, when you talk to young people who got in trouble, it's stunning how often hunger comes up. Because why did you do it? Because my family was hungry, because I was hungry.
Yeah.
Because of, that's not the only reason, but it does come up a lot. And so, but we don't seem to have that conversation in reference to crime very often.
There were two kinds of property thefts that used to happen most often in the city, where I lived. They would steal bikes, and they would steal meat out of people's freezers because they would keep freezers outside. Anybody remember that? Where the freezer was big? All right. So the freezer would be outside, and these two guys moved next door. I won't call their names, but one of the boys, he would always steal meat out of Medea's freezer. And my mama would say, that boy ain't stealing that meat because he can't cook. His mama got him stealing that meat. Right? So David, somebody was stealing the meat. He was stealing the meat, but he couldn't cook at 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
So that was being encouraged.
Right.
Somebody was encouraging that. So people are stealing bikes, transportation, and then stealing food. Then that speaks right to what you're talking about. Those are two of the biggest property crimes that we saw on Dewey Street.
Wow. And, I think I can make it clear for anybody who's in doubt, it's not like we're saying it's okay to go steal your the meat out of the freezer. That's not the point, right? The point is to look at all the different, if you actually want to know why people commit crimes, let's ask them and then unpack that. So, to go back to the other thing you were saying, it's almost like I always feel like I have to get this out there quickly.
Right.
This idea of, and you said it when you were talking, but so often, I think, a discussion of crime, particularly by young people, begins and ends for a lot of people at the idea that their families aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And you will hear that, their family, and then people shake their head, or whatever the case might be, and then that conversation just kind of ends because it's the family's fault.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that and the effect of that particular attitude.
Yeah, so you got to meet my aunt Gloria the other day. So I got
He's a fire plug, y'all.
Yeah, I got an aunt. Her name is Gloria, but everybody calls her Pot. We don't know why. Why we call her Pot, we have no idea. But Donna got to meet her the other day, and one of the first things she said to her was, everybody want to blame the parent, but it wasn't my fault that Zach and that he did and that and that. And she went on. Her point is a valid one, and that is, it's easy for us to say, where are the parents? Right? That's easy. That's a great way to pass it off, and then it doesn't belong. It's not an issue of the village. Now it's just an issue of who lives in the hood. And her point was, her job, and we've had this conversation a lot more in depth than you were able to hear it in the Sun the other day, Donna, but her point was, her job is to make sure that her son, grandsons, great-grandsons are prepared to go into a school system and receive this quality education. She is adamant that school system has failed her boys. And in her defense, she's a great, loving woman. No, she's not the woman who can sit down and do homework with the child. No, she's not the woman who can sit down and solve quadratic equations. She's the woman who's going to cook, clean, wash, provide those basic things, but she can't do what she believes the school system or what she believes that government is supposed to be able to provide. So we can't just get into this mode or idea well, where are the parents? The parents are there in a lot of cases, but in a lot of cases the parents just aren't us, and they don't have access to a lot of the things that we have.
Wow. And you're right. I mean, I hear, there's all kinds of parental situations. I hear young people who blame their parents.
Yeah.
There are parents who are drug addicts. There are parents who, are in prison, and that's another whole conversation about, who's in prison where and for what. But, so I think that what's so bothersome for me is when the conversation ends there. Mm-hmm. I think it's fabulous to talk about the families and what you can do to help the families. Like, Operation Shoestring, right? Yeah. Helps kids and it helps families. A lot, parents from public school. There are a lot of organizations that do that. So that's out there, but it's just, when the general public just kind of stops there, to me that's a sign that people aren't particularly engaged in looking for the real solutions regardless of the parental situation.
Well, I think, again, we all have our own things going on in our own little worlds, and certain things don't fit into our world. I mean, just tell the truth about it. There are some folks who would rather use social media to engage people negatively, or they'll rather use social media in a way that shows their intellectual prowess or the lack thereof, rather than taking ownership of the fact that you spent 4 hours on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and you've got little boys right outside your door who need you to come outside and show them how to cut grass. But you won't do that because you're more interested in being Insta famous. You're more interested in folks saying how smart you ain't. I said ain't. Because it's not smart to ignore the fact that if you stay on the street, if you stay on a block, it's your responsibility, just like it's that parents or just like it's that mama's. My daddy was George, my mama is Dolores. George worked all day, my mama worked all day. So Daddy, who was my great-grandfather, he stayed 3 houses up. If I crossed Turner and Dewey, you better believe that old man at 5'3" was gonna be yelling across that fence, "Hey boy, where you going?" Now I had to have an answer, and I had to have an answer quick. And if I got past him, then there was also Mr. James Littleton, who was the next house up. And he took on that same role or responsibility. And so, I'm not really into colloquialisms or recanting proverbs, but it's not necessarily the issue of the village, but it's definitely the issue of people who are in contact with you, who say that they love you, who say that they love the neighborhood and the community that they live in. So we just got to get to a place where we come out of our bubble, which goes back real quick, and then I'll let you talk.
We're here to hear.
But it goes back to when you talked about Shoestring and these other agencies. They're doing great work. But the problem is that we're doing a lot of this great work in silos. And if you had conversations with these folks, almost everybody's doing some similar kinds of work. And in a lot of cases, we're dipping into a lot of the same pots for the same resources. When ultimately there should be conversations about who's really doing what well. And when you figure out who's doing what well, it helps to loosen up some of the turf tightening, and then you say, all right, if you're Shoestring, you do a great job of this. Here's the data to prove it. Want to make sure you get funded, and then you get connected over here with Salvation Army, who does a much better job with social services, the social services as it relates to whatever the case may be. And then Salvation Army, what are you great at? What are you not great at? Let's see where. Let's connect those dots. So that way, we're doing a more holistic. Taking a more holistic approach to helping deal with ills. Now that doesn't, again, I'm going to go back to your point, that doesn't negate the fact that folks still have to make right choices. And that people are still responsible for the decisions that they make.
Of course they are.
But we have to make sure that they have the opportunities in order to do that.
Well, it always gets me. You know, it's like Mississippi prides ourselves on, I think we come out the most, or one of the most charitable states. You know, we're very proud of helping other people, often at a distance.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. And that's great. Nobody's taken away from that, right? But if we really want to help, what gets me is like, if we really want to help other people, and this is going to get me into the next question here, it's like don't we have to help the people, the young people particularly, most likely to be caught up in crime? And one of the things that was it's so obvious now, but I had to travel around the country to do research to actually understand this, that the young people who are getting caught up in the crimes we're talking about that lead the evening news, all this stuff, right, when they fire a weapon, are the most victimized by violent crime in the country. So I think I knew that my whole life, but I didn't understand it until the last 12 months. So they're also in fear, and they're living in fear, and they're arming themselves, and they're getting caught up in these back and forths. They don't trust the police in many cases because of historic things, because they were arrested when they were 9 years old and abused when they were arrested, whatever the case might be, and these are real stories, right?
Yeah.
So they don't call the police. So you kind of get caught up in this whole cyclical thing. So you said silos, and this is something we've been talking about. You know, one of the things too, like this report, and I'm about to say something nice about the state legislature, and y'all know that this is a big deal to hear me say this. But a couple years ago, I think, whenever it was last session, I'm not sure, they actually put aside $500,000, I guess, right, to look at crime in Jackson.
Right.
Well, you know, I heard that they were going to do a report on crime in Jackson, and you know, like, yeah, okay, it's going to be more of the same. Well, the truth is, the Attorney General had this study done, and this is just one piece of it, the VOTEC study, and it's something that I've been very impressed with. We talked about it. This is just one part of it. They really studied young people in JPS and our issues, talked to so many people, got their stories. It's wonderful reading if you care about these issues. But, and you know what I'm going to say, the thing that just slapped me in the face in this thing is that they zoomed in on the idea that they predict 225 young people in Jackson at risk of violent crime. Now, we might go, that's 225, or we might go, that's not 2,025, or 20,000. 225. I said that to a man in Holland I met recently who's doing work, gang intervention and such, and he said, you know, I deal with more than 225 people myself. So, my point being, how do we figure that out? How do we figure out how to help that 225 kids who are frankly, and I think you and I have agreed on this, and I'm going to shut up and let you talk, are the ones that, as a community, we often, I think, give up on.
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, that number is actually almost statistically appropriate because typically it's that amount of folks who create the most amount of issues in a community. So if you consider the fact that every year the city of Jackson sends about 250 people into the penal system, that number is statistically just about right. Data like that, though, when it stops, you've got to start to ask other questions. So and I think what you have, we'll talk about precursors. So you got to start asking, so what is it about this unique group of 225 young people that puts them in this situation where we will probably be having conversations about them in the next few years as it relates to their placement in the criminal justice system. If you don't start to drill down and ask those questions, then you don't even know where to begin with the necessary interventions. So for me, as a school teacher, the approach to crime is no different than the approach to a kid who's having learning disabilities in the school. First thing that is a conversation about how do you assess what that child's strengths and weaknesses are. And once I've done that, then I identify which of those weaknesses deserve priority. How do we scope and sequence those? Do some of the interventions need to run parallel, or do I scaffold some of those? And in doing that, you write a prescription, you prescribe the intervention, and you progress monitor over time to make sure that you've got exactly what you need. Here's what I'll say. I'll say that we've gotten pretty good at prescribing. We've got at evaluating. We've gotten pretty good at prescribing. We've not been so good at the progress monitoring because we've been more excited about saying that we're doing a good work than measuring the work we're doing. And so we can get overly excited because we're in the community, but not really measuring whether or not we're having real impact on the community.
And who may be slipping through.
And who may be slipping through. Right. So those 225 that we're talking about, not only must they be identified here, but they also must be identified, and then there must be a specific strategic intervention put in place. And then somebody has to be accountable for making sure that the intervention, if it's not working, how do we pivot? How do we put something else in place? And how do we make sure that that intervention is not something that we're losing sight of because we hadn't set the right kinds of goals? Right.
And, you know, and I think, the funny thing is I actually think that 225 number to me, I could almost put on my wall because it's like, in its own way, that's encouraging, right?
Yeah.
If we say, okay, there's got to be a way in our community that we can reach 225 kids at one time and interrupt, sorry, I have no idea how this is sounding on Facebook, so I'm sorry, y'all, but interrupt this cycle.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and then the other thing that came out of some of the research I was doing is that, you know, one retaliation for a gun, especially if you look at it as a virus, which is, there's this expert out of Chicago, Gary Slutkin, who I've written about, if you've read the pieces, but who says that interrupting one retaliation for an act of gun violence can save 70 lives, according to their research.
Wow.
I know. That's pretty powerful too, isn't it? So then you think, okay, 225 kids, I mean, to me it becomes math and planning at some stage.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it's also this idea, and maybe my challenge to people listening is, how do we get that together? You know, how do we take this thing apart and put it back together so that we're tighten our net, I guess.
See, I don't know how to conceptualize that math, but let me tell you. So I had you talked about Chicago and also there's a lot of issues they're having in St. Louis. So I've had a cousin in 2000 who was shot 17 times. We were first cousins, and I did his eulogy. He's a year older than me, and what I know specifically is that he had 6 children. He had 6 children. All 6 of those children were left without a father to provide. All right. Now, I don't know about the 70 other folks, but what I do know is that those children were traumatized. We talked about trauma. I know that those children were left to families who, because of the lifestyle that he lived, he was able to provide, and I mean really provide for those families, and then all of a sudden they're cut off. And you know, I'm not real sure how those kids are doing. I don't know what situation they're in, but I do know that 6 lives with the potential of that trauma being exponentialized over whatever the community that they're living in, that the effects could be felt there. I know what it did to our family. I know that there were cousins and everybody trying to mount up and go to St. Louis at the time, and you know, the funeral, everybody was ready to go and get somebody. The same thing with my little cousin in Chicago, who was shot about those many times about 4 years ago, whose funeral we eulogized, and everybody was ready to go. And so he's left people in that community who, you're right, they're ready to retaliate. I don't know what happened as a result of that. I don't know who got shot back or shot up or shot at as a result of that. But if you don't know, you can't stop it. They weren't talking to the police. So, you know, I don't know how how that math shakes out, but I do know how it looks in real life in the faces of folks who've been affected by it firsthand.
Well, and we've been talking about this, a lot of the research out there is this idea of, what's the phrase, trusted something. See if I put it in my notes.
You got me there.
I know, I just am learning this one. But it's basically off of the violence interrupters, and so right? But there's another word for it, that it seems like what's being discovered is that the best people to go into a community and talk to young people are, and the other word's going to come to me, yeah, it's trusted something, but are people who have actually been through it in one way or another. And this can seem like counterintuitive to people. It's like this guy from Harlem I was talking about, he has 6 felonies, and he now has at least that many college degrees. And he is doing remarkable work, and by the way, we're trying to bring him down to talk to everybody, so everybody come and bring Kai down. But he's dying to come to Mississippi and see what he can help with. But my point being, this is somebody who's been there.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of those folks, and in fact, we've got somebody right here in our community or a couple of different people, as you know, John Knight and is it Lydell?
Oh yeah, Timothy.
Yeah. Lydell. And now the problem becomes, how much can these guys do on their own, without resources, without additional training, etc. No matter how, And so, one of these ideas that seems to keep emerging is that we need people in our communities who are trusted. I see the first part of the word, the phrase I remember. The second part will come to me, but and I feel like in Jackson we're just now starting to even think about dipping our toe into that water.
Yeah, so what John and Tim and a lot of these other guys have is they've got the initial ingredient, and that is authenticity.
Right. Yeah.
So people trust folks that they believe will keep it real, keep it 100 with them. And if you're keeping it 100, then that's the initial foot in the door. Because I think the saying is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so if they know that you care, And at the end of the day, it's just about being real, just keeping it real. There's a phrase that I use, and I say, the thing that you want to hide is typically the thing that God wants to use.
That's a good phrase.
And if you are, see, and I've said this, I think I told you this when we interviewed during the campaign a couple of years ago, and I said that the only reason that I'm the mayor is because I didn't get caught. And that's just me being real. It's not that I was so good, it's just that I didn't get caught doing stuff. It's just that when I was standing on Turner and Dewey holding crack in a Tylenol bottle, they didn't stop me. That's how come I'm the mayor. When we got caught up in the gang fight and they came to the school, JPD came to the school to get us, and my principal stood up for me. I didn't go to jail because my principal supported the lie I told. So I didn't get caught. And when I go and I'm talking and telling these stories and sharing these situations, and then people realize, oh, the mayor's a real human being. And it gives that opportunity. John and Tim, everybody knows them. They go into a neighborhood, in a community, people see their authenticity, they trust them. They don't mind opening up. But the other part is once they've opened up, they need to have the kinds of tools and skills to be able to now drive the train down the track. So they've gotten the train started, it's revving up, steam's coming out of the caboose or whatever it is, but now we've got to move whatever it is that's in the way so that they can get the momentum. That's training. That's giving them opportunities to be mentored by folks like the gentleman in Harlem, and giving them the ability to structure things in communities. So now they don't just win the hearts of people who are in the community. Now they win folks who got the ability and the means to help support and provide resources to their efforts.
By the way, it was in my notes on my phone. It's trusted messenger.
Trusted messenger.
They use that phrase a lot, but it's a really good one when you think about it. It's like you can believe that somebody is real. And we're talking about a messenger to young people who have grown up in trauma, have witnessed a lot. I mean, some of the things you've talked about having dealt with it's an example, and in some cases didn't have as strong of home life as you did, didn't have that tough mama standing out there at the corner. So his mama was like 5'11". You're right. Would stand out with a video camera on the corner during the crack era, and to keep people out. Anyway, he told me, then she told me. It was great. I was sitting on her porch. It was a great story. But not everybody can do that, and so so it's this. I don't know. I feel like we keep running into the brick wall of the police. Let's just be real. The police aren't trusted messengers. Now, do they need to do everything they can be to become that?
They do.
Sure. But there's a lot of history being dragged behind and such, and so then what what else has happened?
Well, so the police piece is really interesting.
We should talk about the police. We are here to talk about them.
So it's interesting. All right. So white parents and black parents, we deal with our children and the police differently. All right. So white parents, you and your kids, police come and you say, hey honey, there's a police, shake his hand, wave at him, he's our friend, he's here to help us, right? Black parents, we're in the store and our kids, that's not all, but a lot, and black parents, our kids are acting up. What do we tell our kids? Police gonna do what? She said it, not me, all right? Police gonna take you to jail. Or I'm gonna call the police, and the police who calls you guys? These police officers right here. Who calls you guys most often to deal with their children? Black parents or white parents? Black parents. All right. Now, what I'm saying is that history has been passed down because police officers have historically never been black folks' friends, and so that message has been passed down to our children and to our children's children. And as a result of that, there is no trust. And so the police, it's a double-edged sword, because they walk into the uniform with the idea that they want to be trusted messengers, but they already have 5 generations of distrust of the police. We went into, the other day, I don't know if you noticed, but when we went into Washington Edition, I took it to the Edition. And we had, yeah, she with it, she with it. 2 police cars, 2 unmarked cars, and they had the lights on. As soon as we stopped, the whole block cleared. Everybody went in the house. So I yelled at them, I said, hey man, turn the lights off, because we want to talk to the people. But the people went in the house. Soon as we pulled in, had we driven on Hibbett Neal Street, he'd have come out and brought coffee. But my point is that there is a level of historic distrust, and then there's also distrust that police officers have created themselves. And so we've got this double-edged sword, we've got this brick wall that we've got to start trying to tear down. And it starts with police officers remembering, number one, that you hadn't always been a police officer. And number 2, remembering that you're an agent of trust, which means that you got to make sure that people understand that you got a story just like them. You got to not be afraid to share those kinds of stories about when you almost got caught, how you are still able to be a police officer, because we have those stories. They have them. Even if they have those badges and those shirts on, you got to be willing to get out of that patrol car, walk that beat every now and then, knock on the door, speak to somebody that's outside cutting the grass, pull over and talk, get out and talk to the dudes that you know might have dope on them. And you ain't got to arrest them right then, but they at least need to know that you're engaging them, that you're a part of what's going on, and as those conversations are happening, then there is a level of trust that is developed. Real quick, there's 3 little boys in the neighborhood. You're gonna love this story. You like storytelling?
Yeah.
All right. I was recently I was at Sundance, and I was a part of this storytelling piece.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that was real cool. So anyway, it's these 3 little boys in the neighborhood. They can't be any more than about 8 years old. So they're always outside. They're like old school little boys. Y'all remember back in the day when kids got put out in the morning and you didn't come back in the house till that evening, to the street. Like they're those kind of little boys. They're not sitting in the house playing Nintendo, little boys.
They're just all over the place.
They're everywhere. The other day they were carrying some boxes or something. I said, where y'all going? We working on our tree house. I was like, what? People still do that?
But then we need more tree houses.
We need more treehouse kids. So anyway, little boy comes up to me and he says, this has been about 6 months ago, and he says, Mr. Mayor Yarber. I said, what's up, man? He said, when you gonna get these potholes fixed?
At least he's consistent.
And I said, I don't know, we're working on it. He said, my coach don't like you. I said, why your coach don't like me? He said, want me to tell you what he said? I said, yeah, tell me what he said. He said, my coach don't like you. He said, cause you won't get the damn pothole fixed in front of your street, in front of your house. I said, well, tell your coach I'm working on it. Well, anyway, since that conversation, it never fails like clockwork. At least 2 or 3 times a week, I get a knock on my door. It's those little boys, and they want to see Mr. Mayor Yarber. I just go outside. Yesterday, they wanted me to come outside to tell me Happy Father's Day and ask me when I was going to get some more playground equipment up at the park. But see, to them, I'm not the bow tie guy.
Yeah.
To them, I'm the dude, they just come knock on the door and I come outside and they say whatever they want to say and I give them juices or water and they go on about their business. See? So police officers and folks who are in those positions of trust, and I wish I could have that kind of relationship with everybody, but I can't. But police officers and folks who are in those situations need to really work to have those kinds of opportunities where little kids can say stuff they want to say to you as long as they check with you, make sure it's all right to say damn. And then when you give them the clearance, then they just, I'm talking about, he stepped right into it too. He said, get these damn streets fixed. It's like, boy, you need a whooping. Anyway, I think though that's the kind of real simple work.
It's profound. It's simple, but it's profound.
Simple. That's the kind of simple
because it's
work.
like, you know, we're in a community where in way too many instances there's just this assumption that there's nothing that you can do to help the really bad kids or the thugs or whatever you want to call it. And that doesn't mean that there aren't, you know, we're not downplaying the idea that there are young people in very difficult circumstances, you know, and that this isn't enough. But it's remarkable to me how often we just don't cross over and try, or that we act afraid of people, and those kind of things, instead of just really engaging.
Well, you know, I think everything is built on relationships, and being. I think what's interesting is this conversation you and I had, because if people pay attention, you and I don't always agree on things. And we'll have very spirited debates on Twitter. And then we'll come right back and it'll be something like this that we both are passionate about, we agree on. And if you've never met us, you think that we are hunky-dory and kumbaya all the time. And that's not it. See, relationships, in this case, it's about being able to find the commonalities and then finding out how we can make those things work well for the good of everybody. And what we know is that in the city, our issues revolve around young people having real opportunities.
That's right.
And if we don't rally around those, then the work you do and the work I do is meaningless, and we've just simply wasted time and opportunities that we had with the platforms that we've been given. So it's relational, and how do we create these relationships? And I think we may put more on ourselves than maybe we should. You're really just responsible for one other person. Just try to duplicate yourself and find that one kid who of this 225. Let's ask, who are they? Can I meet one of them? And then you attempt to duplicate yourself and those attributes that you think make you so great in those children. And you've done it. And you commit to them, you commit to providing accountability, commit to plugging them into the right places and spaces where the resources are. And then I think you've really you become a difference maker in those spaces. It doesn't have to be 3 little boys, it can be 1. And let that little boy be the difference in somebody else's life.
That's right. Well, that's exactly it. And you know how you talk about opportunity. So we should go there, because a lot of it's in the people you talk to, you know, one-on-one. I mean, real conversations, y'all. Yeah. Ask young people what they think. And why, and you may get an earful, but you can learn a lot. And I'll tell you from personal experience that some of the most loving relationships I have can be with young people that I just ask them for their opinion. And then all of a sudden you can become a trusted messenger just by listening and being trustworthy, right? And so that's really a big deal. And I am talking about including these kids, not just the kids kind of around them or the young people. You know, I try not to say kids all the time, because young people, because not all are children. Right. You know, and young adults. Young adults, that's right. And you know, I think in the last 6 months I've been hugged more by some of the young men I've been interviewing than. I saw that the other day. Yeah. Then you know, because you can't make it up. He takes me to the Washington edition, where I've been spending a lot of time, as some of you know from the articles. We get out, and then we immediately run into a couple of young men who had been the twins, who had been on the featured in that first story, and they came over. They had run. They came and visited us, right? So anyway, so opportunity though, that's a really important thing to get to. because I've learned a whole lot about this idea, this myth that young people the young people we're talking about, don't want jobs, or don't want opportunities, or don't want to work.
Yeah.
And I have learned that it's a very insulting attitude.
Very. If you want proof, check my Instagram DM or check my Facebook inbox. Almost every one of those are requests for opportunity. Almost every one of them. Either it's somebody asking about a job, or someone who's asking about housing, or someone who's asking for help or to be connected with some social service program. Right now there's a young man, and I am going to get him a job one way or the other. His name is Derek Dory. Anybody needs some help somewhere, let me know. Derek Dory needs a job. Right now I'm trying to get him a job with the city, but this young man is so adamant, he text messages me every day. Every day.
He might need some sales.
I can prove it. He text message. I have the text log. The kid text messages me every day. Good morning. Just what I want you to forget about. Good morning. Here are my applications. Good. Yesterday he says, Happy Father's Day. Don't forget about it. I can't make it up. It's real. So it is insulting to say that they don't want to work. Again, we have to provide the opportunity for them to take advantage of an opportunity.
Right, and transportation, training, equipment, internet access.
Yep.
All the things that we're listing, and with any luck, there are people in this audience who are watching who are saying, well, maybe I can help with X.
Yeah.
And then I can plug into that little piece of it. And also this idea, and it's tough, and I was looking here, I can't quite find the quote in my VOTEC report, but one of the things they talk about in here is that young people don't always get the opportunities they need because they've been in trouble and people are afraid to hire them, are afraid to bring them in and mentor them. And you know what? It's dangerous to drive down the street because everybody texts.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, it's like, are we really that afraid? I get it. Everybody has to worry about security and, right. But I think what we're trying to say is that if we keep doing that, then it just becomes, that is just part of the cycle too.
Right.
It's kind of like we've got to step up, and especially in cases where, it's just get to know the young people. Just like you would anybody else. Talk to people, find out what they're really like, and get a sense of whether there's somebody that you can trust or not. And that's, I think, is really important. And so one of the things they say, is that in this report is that a huge barrier are those attitudes right there. So part of the reason the 225, give or take, get isolated and then don't get the opportunities that they need, and a lot of, and they're, to a young person, the people that I've met and talked to are really smart.
Yeah. Well, my challenge is for folks to follow the lead that the city's lead, where we banned the box, and we did that in January 2015. You remove that initial prejudice, and we're not saying don't do your background checks, but what we're saying is remove the initial prejudice. Find out, get an opportunity to sit across from some young person or from some person who's been in a bad situation. Find out who they are. Get an opportunity to know them. And what you would typically be able to find out is that you've got somebody who will probably rise to the cream of the crop of all your interviewees. And then you make the kind of determination that you need to make based on whatever that background check is. But remove that initial prejudice. If you've got the opportunity to provide jobs, I don't know what they're going to do at Continental Tires, but if the supervisors are not being adamant about giving folks who are re-entry folks who are qualified for re-entry programs, if they're not giving them the opportunity, they're doing a real disservice. Re-entry.
Yeah. So important. And there are programs in our state. There are things that everybody can plug into to really help in this way. I think that's part of, this is solutions journalism, right? We're really trying to get at the solutions and find different people entry points. One of the things I would say is make sure you have young people at the table. It's remarkable to me how many conversations that I have been in the room with without a single young person under 25 in the room that's talking about young people.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we adults, we have all the answers.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, we're sitting up here. I will say to y'all that by the end of the summer, the Youth Media Project is going to be hosting something, perhaps right here in this room, that they're thinking about exactly what to do to talk about some of these issues. So please come back for that. So a last thing I would ask you, and then we're going to turn it back to Todd. So what other, for questions, so what other challenges for the audience do you have?
Well, again, I think that's an important one, and I want to just kind of recap. I think everybody's responsible for duplicating themselves at least once, and that's beyond your children in your house. I'm talking about people that you really need to try to find out who these 225 young people are, and if you can find out at least one of them, figure out how you get plugged in to the things that they have going on in their lives. We're not saying that you have to be their savior. What we're saying is that you need to be accessible to them. And then you allow them to decide if you're going to be a part of that saving grace that's in their lives. But you just want to be accessible. The other thing, finally, that I'll say is be real with people. Make sure that you're not trying to hide the parts of you that created the character in you that you have.
Amen.
Don't stop faking the funk. You ain't always been saved. You ain't always been prim and proper. You ain't always had all the money you have. And don't let people be fooled by the presentation that you give. Let people see your scars. Let people know that you've had bouts of depression. And let people know that you probably had situations where you've even considered killing yourself maybe. And how did you get out of that? Those are real live things that these young people are dealing with. And they need to know that their superheroes have also. And that's when you let them know, I had a baby out of wedlock. Let them know, I've not always made, let them know, I took the morning after. Let them know, I had an abortion. Those are the real things that people deal with every day that affect their well-being, their general health, how they make decisions on how they'll live from one day to the other. So just be real.
Wow. And not judge.
And it's hard to judge when you're looking in the mirror. When you're looking at, there's no way in the world. Look, they got upset with me because I did a proclamation for the Pride Pride Parade. Well, I mean, the way I look at it is, if that's them and Tony Yarber, I got enough of my own demons to be exercised. So if I believe in a heaven or a hell, and somebody's gonna go to heaven for this and somebody's gonna go to hell for that, I might go to hell for something different than you, but we'll all be in hell together. And so there's no need in me judging how you sin because you sin differently from me. I'll say it again. Don't judge me because I sin differently from the way that you sin. And I'm not going to judge you because you sin differently from me. How about everybody just clean up their own front door and mind your business and go and help one of the 225.
All right. Don't see why we could just do this for hours,
All right, but we are going to try to get to your questions. If you wrote one down, Amelia is over here. Let's get it passed over to her. And while we're doing that, I'm going to ask one, but y'all don't turn around. I don't want the mayor to break his neck looking at me trying to answer my question.
We won't turn around. And there's a reception afterward with food and drinks, so you guys hang
Right,
out.
so stick around. We did have, by the way, somebody on Facebook Live from Uganda, apparently. So,
Hello.
Wow.
one of our Facebook commenters said, it wasn't really a question, but said the answer is a local farmers exchange. How do we continue, if the problem is, and I think that's probably in response to an earlier discussion about food,
Yeah.
but where are we on the idea of getting good food, getting farmers directly in contact with people who live in places where they aren't well served in that way?
Yeah, so Jeff Good has really taken off with this, and Councilman Stamps, where they're really trying to create this opportunity where local farmers can take their food into these local establishments and do it at a cheaper price. And I think what we've got to do is to, as it relates to the city and the government, is we've got to figure out how do we get out of the way and make sure that they have the opportunity to do that without us creating more red tape for them.
Okay, another question here is, and we know you don't exactly have a government magic wand for this kind of thing, but the money frequently goes to the police department when you're talking about dealing with issues of crime. It doesn't happen, further up the line or further back in that struggle. Where should resources go? If you could wave that wand, where would you put the resources?
Well, I think our general fund dollars they go towards police for fighting crime, but we also utilize our human and cultural services to do a lot of that work as well. We utilize human and cultural services. For example, this summer we have 450 some odd children who are working, and that's through human and cultural services. We have even right now the cruising that's going on for the summer, where we're providing an outlet. That's happening through Parks and Rec and Human and Cultural Services. We provide opportunities through the arts, where we're giving endowments and where we're giving funds to arts programs. We're actually doing, there's a program that we're doing over at Battlefield Park that engages a group of young people, and it is a program that the city is engaging and investing money in. But if I could wave that wand, I put it in early childhood education.
And if I could wave a wand, I'm not a mayor, I would wave it toward resources for some sort of violence interruption program with these trusted messengers, in addition to early childhood education.
Yeah, y'all should
See some of these cards. This is that's so much fun.
This is a good audience.
Where did that one go? I'll start with this then. We noticed your recognition within the U.S. Conference of Mayors. How is Jackson benefiting from that relationship?
I think what has happened is Jackson has been given an opportunity to be on the national stage, and we haven't. So I'll give you an example. When we had the lead issue, it was specifically because of the work that we've been doing with the U.S. Conference of Mayors that we were able to access relationships through NAPWA, which is a water resource agency. We were able to access relationships from some of the same experts who have been deployed to Flint, where we've been able to hear directly from folks like Shirley Franklin, former mayor of Atlanta, who was basically on loan to me for that situation. So it's given us the opportunity for the city to be on a national platform. We've been able to get opportunities, for example, with Bloomberg, where we literally not paid any money to create an open data platform, and that was through U.S. Conference. We've been able to see the city get opportunities here recently with a lead grant. So it's given us opportunities, and I can go on and on, but it's been a great time for the city.
Okay, this question is, the people who teach in JPS are burdened with consistently having to do more with less, and the system as a whole is often viewed as corrupt, top-heavy, and inefficient. How can we as citizens of the city itself work with JPS to make real progress and improve the system so that our children can learn in environments that are free of discipline problems and have resources to learn successfully?
You got to figure out how to own the system again. You got to figure out how it becomes. See, right now it's us and them. It's not us. Most of the folks don't know that many of the schools, and that comment says to me that there's a gap in the information. Most of the folks don't know that your system, Jackson Public Schools, has the #1 middle school in the state of Mississippi, in the top 50 middle schools in the country. You don't know that at least 20 of those of your elementary schools are in the top of all elementary schools in the state of Mississippi. So there's an information gap when you say that, you know, it's ineffective and inefficient. There are areas, but my challenge would be where you own this system again, where you take ownership, and the only way that you really take ownership is when you engage it, when you become a part of what's happening in those systems, when you start actually being in those school buildings, when you're actually in those classes, in the hallways during the classroom that's changes, and you're able to tell a child, stop, don't walk across the street because there's no crossing guard, and you're the crossing guard. You're actually learning you're learning their names, and they're not just those children or those kids. So that's the first place, and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It's more meaningful and more impactful than just being a school sponsor.
So crimes of circumstance will go up as incarcerations of family members go up. An absent parent is damaging. Does JPD have a structure in place to avoid over-targeting certain areas or overreacting? Are officers rewarded by good, or are they rewarded for good policing rather than for jacked up arrest numbers? So this has been a problem in New York and Philadelphia.
Well, under my leadership, what we've been asking police officers to do is to use science and not just nuance. And so, for example, what I'm more interested in is seeing police officers engaged in community policing than I am in seeing how many arrests we can have. What we know is that there are a couple of things that decreases crime. Number one is when you get the bad guys off the street. Normally, we can make 5 or 6 arrests. Let's say, for instance, there's a rash of house burglaries around the city. You arrest 4 or 5 of those folks. Typically, house burglaries dip. Am I correct in saying that, Commander? All right. So those house burglaries typically dip. So it's a small amount. And what we're typically trying to do is make determinations of who those folks are, so that we arrest those people. We know the increased presence, and then community policing, where you know who your beat officer is, where it is the community who's also engaged in fighting crime, observing and reporting, being present, having an organized block where there's a block captain, where there is community patrol, where there are community patrols that are going on, and that's what we've really been trying to see happen in the city. It's not happening as much as we would have liked in the last 26 months, but we think that we made really, really great strides. When you see crime numbers where we reduced crime by 17%, where we are actually on target to be under our homicide rate at the end of the year compared to last year, which will be 2 straight years of seeing that reduction happen. And the police officers will tell you, it's not because they've done superb policing. It's because they've been able to engage some superb community people who've assisted them in seeing this kind of crime, these kinds of crime numbers.
So Donna, this one might actually be for you, but just to kind of clarify, we're talking about those 225 kids.
Okay.
So the question is, how old are these kids typically? Are they in school? How can they be reached? What do we know?
Now, my understanding, and I really will tell Facebook there that I'll figure out how to link these reports so everybody can read them yourselves.
There should be an electronic report at the station.
Yeah, I think there is, and maybe our folks know how to do it already, but we'll make sure to do that. Now, I believe here they are in JPS schools, as I understand it. And there are all kind of numbers here. Of the 30,000 students currently enrolled in JPS, according to these data, we can predict that approximately 5% or 1,500 students will at some point get arrested. That's just arrested. Then they drill it down toward a target efficiency group And the two strongest indicators, by the way, of risk of violent crime is having dropped out of school at some point and having already been involved in the criminal justice system. Now that's kind of caveat to what the mayor was saying. If we didn't talk a whole lot about that tonight, we're exploring that in our coverage. But something we all got to really think about is that involvement in the criminal justice system, especially for juveniles, makes it more likely that they're going to commit worse crimes. So it's one thing to make the arrest for robberies, get people off the street, and those robberies drop on the short term. We've got a long term and a cycle problem. And I know we don't have time to go deep into that right now, but it is something that we've really got to think about. And then if we are arresting young people for doing things wrong, what are we doing then? Is there, I am really on record against, except for, very small percentage, very specific times, putting juveniles' faces out there for arrest. And it's, sure, am I a bleeding heart? Do I like kids? Sure. But do I also want to help crime in the community get lower because we're not turning young people who did something stupid into a criminal and keeping them in that criminal justice system? I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but the report will in more detail.
Can I just say something quickly though?
Sure.
That indicator that talked about dropouts. So you got to drill down, remember? So don't just hear the data and then leave it on the table. Why are they dropping out? Over and over again, the research will suggest that they drop out because they are not successful. Why are they not successful? They cannot read. And if they cannot read, then it multiplies their chances of dropping out. So typically, all they're doing is waiting to be 17 so they can drop out legally. And what are they doing until they're 17? Acting a fool. And being placed into the criminal justice system. So we've got a real job, but from the cradle to 4 years old, to ensure that those emerging literacy skills are in place so that a child, when they walk into a 5-year-old program, that a kindergarten teacher isn't teaching phonics. That kindergarten teacher is turning the page, turning the door to decoding, making sure that a child has the ability walking in that classroom to be able to read. So when 3rd grade hits, that child is at or above grade level. And we're not talking about having this kind of conversation. What we're doing is we're talking about the fact that we're trying to find how do we find more jobs for a generation in the next 20 to 25 years. Every county, every rich county in the country, whether you're talking about Prince George's County, whether you're talking about the $1 billion mile right outside of Dallas where they built Cowboy Stadium, it's called the $1 billion mile. All of those folks, you know what they all have in common? They all have in common that they're that almost 100% of those people are college graduates. College graduates. So there's something in those numbers, and we've got to see how we translate that and bring it into the bold new city.
All right, I'm going to ask one more deep question, I think, and then
that's for Tom.
And then we'll do a speed round, but this is early.
Okay, Todd loves a speed round now.
All right, so here we go. The question is essentially that many of the obstacles plaguing Jackson are born of a lack of political will to address important legislation. How do we engage our citizens? And these are the topics: living wage, proliferation of guns, providing accurate sex education, funding early childhood education, inflated prison spending, incarceration versus rehabilitation, underfunding of mental health services. Dorothy, is this your question? It sounds like you're and I'm picking on you all night. How do we...
And infrastructure.
How do we engage our citizens?
I didn't, anyway.
How do we engage our citizens to be more proactive in voting and holding their elected officials accountable? And I'm almost seeing this as, these are some things that a lot of Jackson could agree on, but we can't get out of the legislature. Maybe that's not fair, but what do you think? Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think what drives people to the polls are the topics that most affect them every day. And until politicians have platforms that everyday people can identify with, they won't come. If right now, and I'll just be honest with you, re-entry isn't going to get people to the polls.
Not the people who can actually vote.
Not the people who can actually vote. It's not going to get people to the polls. The issues that will get people to the polls are crime, if it has been high. Infrastructure issues will get people to the polls if it has affected enough folks. Those kinds of, and I'm not talking about these big national issues, because they don't typically drive the right people to the polls. But as politicians, we've got to make sure that we are and have created platforms that engage you, that bring you to the polls. Living wage is a great conversation to have, but how do we make conversation about living wage register in the minds of people who only want to just see an opportunity to do a little bit better? What does that translate to? What does a living wage look like? We hear that word, but what does that look like for folks who have been making $9 an hour? And until we can do that, until we can make it meaningful to them, they don't come to the polls for those kinds of things.
And I'll just add very briefly, on the crime front, a big part of the reason we're doing this series this year and what we're trying to do is to get people to engage in the crime issue in a different way, to actually understand that if they want to do something about it, that we've got to really break it down into this systems approach and this holistic approach, as you talked about. And your stories, I mean, I think the most powerful thing said all night were the stories that you told about the violence that you saw and witnessed among people you know, as the mayor of a capital city in the United States. And I don't think that those stories are asked for enough or told enough, because I think those are the kinds of things that can build those bridges, I hope, I pray.
All right, speed round.
Okay, speed round.
Answers in one sentence or less.
Okay, that's good.
Which means, Tim, we can't put on the records for some of these because this is tough, right? From one of our youth media projects reporters, we have the question, what do you think is the main cause of violence in the youth community?
I'm telling you, they're good.
Oh, man. Lack of conflict resolution skills.
And whoever asked that, what do you think, if you want to answer?
She does not want to answer.
No, she doesn't want to answer. She said, I'll report it. You just wait, I'll block it.
All right. Early childhood education seems to be an excellent proven way to decrease crime in the long run. How can we push more early crime education initiatives and use the faith community?
I'm sorry, ask it again.
How can we push more early crime education initiatives and use the faith community?
I know where that came from. I think the faith community is a lot like the John Knights that we talked about. They've got a lot of will, a lot of zeal, but there's no real know-how to do that. So we've got to make sure that the faith community gets that same kind of training, and you get the opportunity to circle around through some kind of an alignment piece around those issues. But until the actual training happens, we'll just have a lot of goodwill and a lot of good intentions.
So this question says, you brought up the issue regarding trust of the police in communities. I personally believe that a police board with elected members of the community on its seats is a good way to increase oversight and improve relations. What are your thoughts?
I'm not convinced of that yet, because while the community may enjoy it, I'm not certain what it does for the police exactly. I think there needs to be some way that we bridge it. I'm just not sure if an oversight, the word oversight troubles me.
That looks like something we could look for solutions for. Hint to the journalists in the room.
How does one get out of a gang?
There are gang intervention programs that are out there. What I challenge you to do is, the first thing is to give, if you're in Jackson, call my office, 601-999-2999. 960-1084, or you can DM me at Tony Yarber, TonyYarber, and I can get you plugged in.
So something I should give you a little more time to answer. Please talk about the Housing Trust Fund. There's federal dollars available. What is the city doing to take advantage of? Apply for that. It's so needed. An important piece of crime prevention is to have safe, affordable housing.
The city of Jackson has created the only vehicle for that in the state, and we're looking forward to speaking with the governor here really soon about how to make sure that the city of Jackson gets a lion's share of that windfall that we look forward to coming.
All right, now the question is, what is the Jackson 500 program?
Jackson 500, great program that we've started alongside, working together Jackson, that gets folks engaged in specific training. We've also been able to partner with Hines Community College. We've got a little over 70 folks who are involved in that now, getting skills training specifically around the things that we're going to be using to do infrastructure improvements. So when contractors come, we can show them that we've got a pool of eligible, qualified workers so that they don't have to go and get folks outside of the city of Jackson.
Woohoo!
It's workforce development.
Okay, we got to feed people.
All right, and this is the last question then.
Okay.
Why can't people fill potholes themselves? And the rest of the question, I
Do
think...
we really have to end on a
Well,
question?
Seriously, I think it'd be... Here's about this, if you can hear me. Okay, what could the city do, if anything, to allow or help citizens willing with the means to assist the city and help themselves?
Well, one of the things that we're considering is there's a neighborhood that is interested in floating a bond for their neighborhood. We're looking at how the city can assist them in that, because they're the ones who will be repaying it specifically for that area of town. So we're looking at how we can assist them in doing that. Communities who want to be engaged, want to do that kind of stuff, we'd love to be able to help you. If you're one person, want to try to get it done, let us know. We want to come out so that we can make sure that it's done right, and that liability is not on the city, or not on you rather than that it's on the city.
Y'all give them a round of applause. Let me quickly thank Millsaps for making all this possible. We've got John Sewell here on camera. That's not usually his gig. Usually he just makes these things happen, so we appreciate him filling in for that. The food upstairs is courtesy of them as well. I'd like to thank Capital City Beverage for the beer that y'all will see out there. I need to acknowledge the Solutions Journalism Network, because they've been encouraging this work that Donna and her team are doing. And they've given a new grant to the entire JFP news team.
Right.
And that's how we're doing some of the work on
The juvenile detention.
Yeah, juvenile detention.
This is going to go on all year, so y'all just stay with us.
We're going to keep doing this activity, the one-on-ones. If you follow us at the jfpdaily.com, you can get on our newsletter and you'll find out about them. You can subscribe for future announcements. Thank you for your attention, and please join us for the reception.